Welcome to Unleash the Awesome with Dave Gambrill. All of us have unique skills, talents, and abilities that aren't being used to their full potential. Our mission is to share the people, tools, apps, and other resources that will help you unleash your awesome on the world.
Yo, what's up? It's Dave. Welcome to another episode of Unleash the Awesome. And today let's talk about that hammer doesn't work. Listen, I hear some of the most ridiculous excuses from people about why they can't do things, why they can't succeed at things. But one of the craziest ones is something to the effect of, that hammer doesn't work. That thing doesn't work. That tool doesn't work. That software doesn't work. That technique doesn't work. That tactic doesn't work. That app doesn't work. That thing does not work. I think what happens is people forget to finish the sentence, which is typically because I didn't do the work, or because I didn't try, or maybe in some circumstances, it doesn't fit my specific situation, which could be accurate. But really, I hear this a lot, right? So let's just talk about it in the fitness capacity, okay? I hear a lot of people say something like, cardio exercise doesn't work for fat loss. Well, you have to better define what cardiovascular exercise is and what you think it is, and then what you're trying to do. And the reality is, if you do zone 2 cardio, mostly walking on a treadmill at an incline, keeping your heart rate in the zone 2 range, and you do it for a prolonged period of time, over enough number of days, and you also are paying attention to your diet and you have a calorie deficit and things like that, cardiovascular exercise is a great tool to help you lose body fat. Strength training, also a great tool or technique to help you lose body fat, because you put on muscle, you burn more calories at rest when you have more muscle mass. It's a great way to burn calories. Therefore, probably, as long as, again, you're paying attention to what you're doing in the kitchen, is a great way for you to probably lose weight or body fat in the long run, right? So those things work, but a lot of times people say, that doesn't work, period. What a declarative statement, okay? I tried that, that didn't work. I tried that, that does not work. Well, I mean, it does if you use it properly, if you put it in the proper context, right? The same could be said for dieting. Oh, I tried that kind of diet, that didn't work. Well, I mean, we all know generally that if you have a calorie deficit and you're getting enough protein and things like that, that again will probably help you gain some muscle mass if you're working out and lose body fat, have some body recomposition, all right? But where I hear this the most in my line of work, right? So I have a Facebook group called Digital Marketing Mentorship, and a lot of times I recommend tools to people, tools for, the current tool du jour is artificial intelligence stuff, and you all know that I love Jasper. I'll make sure a link to that is in the show notes or the description, wherever you happen to be catching this. And if you're looking to do copywriting, sales and marketing copywriting that converts, you're looking for a tool to help you write an email, Jasper is certainly a good option for you. But even with that, I'll hear people say, I tried it, it didn't work. I tried it, that does not work. Or just simply, that doesn't work. And I'm like, well, tell me what you did. Help me understand how you got there. Help me understand how you arrived at that conclusion. And generally what it boils down to is they didn't spend any time going through the onboarding process that they had, and they didn't figure out how to properly use the tool or the software, or in this case, Jasper, and they didn't give it more than one prompt or one chance. They just put a couple things in and I can't do this. Well, of course you can't do it, because you weren't paying attention to the things that were showing you how to use it properly, right? And that's where the title of this episode came from, this idea of that hammer doesn't work. If you took a hammer that was in good shape, right? The head was connected properly. It wasn't faulty, right? A good hammer, right off the shelf at the hardware store. If you held the hammer by the head and you tried to use the handle to drive nails or to remove nails, whatever you're trying to do. But if you try to use the wooden handle generally, or the rubber handle to drive nails, you're going to have a bad time. You might be able to do it. You might be able to figure it out. It'll take you a while. It's not going to be nearly as effective as if you actually held the handle properly and use the head of the hammer to drive the nail or remove the nail. Again, no matter, depending on what you're trying to do. But just take that visual of somebody grabbing a hammer by the head, right? Holding it by the head of the hammer and swinging it in such a way that they're using the handle to drive the nail. And then they look at you and they say, this hammer doesn't work. Well, yes, you're right. It doesn't work in the way that you're using it because you're using it wrong. You're not using it properly. And so I would encourage you to think about as whatever it is you're doing, whatever tools you're using, whatever techniques you're using, whatever, think about the complete sentence there, okay? This doesn't work because I didn't work it. This doesn't work because maybe I'm not using it right. This doesn't work because whatever. And sometimes this doesn't work because it really just doesn't work in this particular case. I don't want you to use that as an excuse though, because oftentimes people just come to that conclusion too fast without doing enough diligence, without trying it hard enough, or they'll say, this diet or this exercise didn't work. I tried it for a day. I ate clean for a day. I did one strength training workout in the gym. It doesn't work. Well, guess what? You're right. It doesn't work because it takes a little bit of time. The tools and techniques to grow a business online take a little time. We can do some stuff to get you a jump start. We can do some stuff to have some early success or some small success or get you some quick wins, some micro wins, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it takes time. But don't just dismiss things outright because you're lazy or you didn't try it or you didn't fully understand this situation or the tool or how to use it. And one of the biggest ones I see is just simply that people skip over the process, the onboarding process, the education process of how to use it. It even happens in Home Depot, right? Not with something as simple as a hammer, but for whatever reason, and I talked about this on a couple previous episodes, I'll link to them in the show notes for you, but people generally, adults specifically, don't want to be seen as not knowing what they're doing. I don't know why, right? So they have some image that they're trying to protect. And so with their ego, they'll go into Home Depot or something and try to get a tool to solve a plumbing problem that they have at home, but they're not a professional plumber and they rarely do plumbing and they honestly don't know what they're doing. So they go into Home Depot and ask a question like, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. And then the person in Home Depot trying to diagnose the situation or give you better information is like, so what about this? What about this? And usually the person who went in there, the customer is like, oh yeah, I know. Yeah, okay, whatever. And then they don't end up getting really good advice or the exact part or whatever because they didn't just say like, listen, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like this is leaking. I think this is a problem. Here I took a picture. I don't know what to do. I'm probably going to call a plumber eventually, but I'm going to try to fix it first. Right? If you did that, the person at Home Depot that works in the plumbing department that might have some experience could say, oh, okay, here's what we want to do. Or you need this kit, or you need this tool, or do you have one of these at home? You don't even need to buy something new. You can do this. And you would go, oh, okay. Or maybe Phil Swift would tell you, use some Flex Seal and spray it on there, and that'll stop it. I don't know. But unless you get honest about what the situation is and what you actually need, then no tool is going to work for you because you don't know what it is you're trying to do. And the tools won't solve all the problems, right? So let's go back to the hammer for our little analogy, our little teaching tool. I'm sure you've all heard that saying about if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if that's the only tool you have and you're trying to drive screws with a hammer, I mean, you can do it, but it's not super effective. But if you're trying to use a hammer to drill a hole, you're going to have a hard time, really hard time. You could probably figure out a way to use the claw part of the hammer to get you started and maybe get a hole going. But if you're trying to drive like a deep hole that you're going to eventually put a maybe bolt into or put a screw into, you're not really going to be able to do it with a hammer. And so that's the other situation I find. People will say, well, I'm trying to do this and here's what I'm using. And I'm like, well, that's not really going to accomplish that. Right? Where people will ask me the equivalent in the digital space of like, oh, I'm trying to drill a hole. Should I use a screwdriver or a hammer? And I'll say, well, hold on. Let me ask a clarifying question. You're trying to drill a hole. Is that what I heard you say? Yeah. And you're asking me if you should use a hammer or a screwdriver, right? Is that what you said? So yeah, I'm like, well, neither. What you actually need is a drill. And I'm not saying this to make fun of people or belittle people, but a lot of times, especially in a space that you don't know, you just don't know what you don't know. You don't know that another tool is available. So sometimes people will ask me a question like that. To me, that's what it sounds like. And I'm like, wait, hold on. Okay, wait, that's what you're trying to do? Or there's actually a much easier way or a better way or a different way. Or do you already have this? Or are you using that? Like a lot of people who have MacBooks or Mac computers, there's so many tools on a Mac computer that they could use to do a lot of the stuff. So like recording this podcast and editing this podcast and stuff, I can use GarageBand. That's right on my Mac. I don't need to use anything else. Although occasionally I use Audacity, which is a free app. All right. But if somebody said to me, hey, I'm trying to record a podcast, I'm trying to do this and whatever, what would you do? And one of the questions I would ask is, would you have a Mac or a PC? And if it said a Mac, I'd say you could just use GarageBand. Just go in there and do the audio recording option in a new project and hit record and go. And you could do it right there. And people are often like, whoa, cool, thanks. Because it doesn't cost them anything else or anything extra. They already have that tool, right? And they hadn't thought about it because they just don't know what they don't know. So as you're going through the process of trying to unleash your awesome in whatever thing that it is, just remember this from two perspectives, okay? One, are you asking the right question of the person that's trying to give you advice? Or are you telling them all the information they need to give you the proper advice on what tool you should use? When you're given that advice, do you actually try to use it? I'm not going to say try. Do you actually use it? Do you go through the onboarding process? Do you watch the YouTube video? Do you actually try to build something with it yourself? And then do you give it enough time? Like, do you actually give it enough time? Right? So a lot of people will say, I bought the hammer and I was swinging the heck out of it. And I'll be like, really? Yeah, nothing happened. And Dave, you said give it time. So I gave it like 2 months. Interesting. Tell me more about that. What are you doing? And what it comes down to is they're holding the hammer by the head and trying to use the handle to drive the nail. I'm like, whoa, okay. Cool that you stuck it out. Cool that you're asking for help. Why don't we try to change your technique a little bit? Why don't you try doing this? Right? And a lot of times they go, oh, I never thought of that. And they switch it up. And then they get back to me and they go, whoa, you're never going to believe this. That's one of my favorite comments I get. Emails, sometimes on my podcast, comments. You're never going to believe this. I did that thing you said with that tool that you said, and it worked. And I'm often like, really? That's so cool. That's amazing. Or I might say something smart like, yeah, every now and then I do share some useful information, right? Because a lot of the stuff I'm sharing on this podcast, a lot of stuff I share in my Facebook groups, on my email newsletter, which if you don't have access to it, I don't know why you don't. I'll put a link in the show notes or the description for you to get my resource guide so you can get on my email list, which has the tools that you might need and descriptions of the tools so you can look at it and go, oh, okay. And it's broken down by category, essentially hammers, screwdrivers, drills, things like that, except it's landing page builders, email marketing services, AI, generative copywriting tools, etc., and so on, with some bonus stuff, including some prompts to help you with that AI thing. On that list, I show you, one, the tools, but two, I give you like a sentence or two, sometimes a full paragraph on like what this is and what it isn't and why it's different or better compared to some of the other things in the marketplace, because you get some perspective. And I think what I say in the intro to that resource guide is something along the lines of, you're not really going to know if this is the answer to your problem unless you try it yourself. And by try it, I don't mean just buy it or get the free trial, but that you actually have to use it. So a lot of times you'll hear me say in the online marketing sense, just build a web page or build a quote lemonade stand, right? Just build something that doesn't really matter, like a small business type thing, like a made up business, or maybe you volunteer at your church or for your youth athletic league or something, and they need a website. Like, do it for that. That's a lower risk thing. You learn how to use the tool, and then you go, oh, okay, I'm figuring my way around this because it's not your pet project or your baby where you're worried about getting the colors just right and everything just right before you publish it. Then the risk is lower. And so then when you go and do it, you learn how to use the tool, and then all that knowledge that you gain, it's transferable to when you actually do a project that's higher risk or that matters to you, like building your own opt-in page or sales page or quote website, whatever it is you're trying to do, right? But you actually learn how to use that tool. That's why, let's go back to my hammer analogy. If you've ever been to Home Depot or Lowe's or one of the big box hardware retailers, oftentimes on the weekends, they'll have these little courses, and they're geared mostly towards children or, parents bringing their kids in, but it's about how to build a birdhouse. And they usually have kits on birdhouse kits. And I don't even know if they charge you for this stuff, but it's a marketing thing from their perspective to get you in and to get kids, right? To get the hooks in the next generation, to get them to be do-it-yourselfers so that Home Depot or Lowe's will continue to have consumers forever. I mean, if they're honest, that's what they're doing. It's great marketing. Anyway, you go in there and you build a birdhouse, and they have the whole kit there. And there's the pieces of the birdhouse and the nails and everything. And they might just give you a hammer and they'll say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how you do it. And you build that small project. And it helps. I mean, it's mostly for the kids, but for some adults too, it helps them build their confidence around building something and creating something. And they get a micro win. They go, oh, look at this little thing I built. They learn how to use a hammer. They learn how to drive nails. They learn how to, paint it. Maybe they decorate it there, or maybe it's come back next week and they'll decorate it. So you learn about paints and the colors and the brushes and some other stuff, right? So you learn all these things, you build up some confidence. And then if you're going to go build something bigger, a tree house or a deck on your house or something, at least you have some transferable skills. So the same thing holds true for stuff you're going to try to do online. Like, do something smaller, get your confidence up, learn how to use the tools and the apps and the software or whatever, and then you'll be able to do bigger things with it. All right, but don't just, if you were just learning how to do that stuff, like building stuff, you wouldn't just run right into it and be like, you know what? I don't know the first thing about carpentry or framing a house or anything like that. I'm going to build a house today. I'm just going to go do that, right? That sounds ridiculous. Equally ridiculous is when somebody says to me, I'm just going to go build a website and a sales page right now. I don't know the first thing I'm doing. I'm like, whoa, okay, wait, slow down. Maybe do the demo that they have. Maybe create like a fake one for a fake business. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I just know from how human beings learn, they're going to hit road bump on the speed bump on the road to progress. And then they're going to be like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. Right. So often it's okay, cool. Appreciate your enthusiasm. Let's redirect that a little bit to this. I would learn how to do this smaller thing or work on focus on learning how to use this tool properly. And then you can deploy it against this bigger problem that you have. Well, isn't that a waste of time? That's going to take too long. Listen, if you don't do that small thing and you just run into the big thing and try to do it, the headache and frustration and the stuff that you're going to run into, it's going to take you probably 10 times longer to do it. Versus if you just go do something small that doesn't really matter, you learn how to do it, and then you apply it to the bigger thing, you'll actually be able to do it so much faster. So those two things combined will actually take you a shorter time than if you just run into it and you're fumbling around and you don't know what you're doing and you don't actually use it. Right? Like, get a quick start and build the birdhouse at Home Depot so they show you how to use the hammer properly. So think about that. The next time you are tempted to say or declare, that doesn't work. Have you gathered enough information, both personally but also done the research on it? And if you've done the research on it, did you do appropriate research for the appropriate population or situation? Because if not, I don't think you could say that doesn't work, right? You might be able to say it doesn't work in certain situations, but you can't say declaratively it doesn't work for you because you've not tried it. So at some point you have to try it. Okay, so if you hear me say something like, well, I like this or I like that, and you go, I don't like that, or I read a review and somebody said they didn't like it, I might say, well, have you tried it? When my kids would say, I don't like that when it comes to foods. Have you ever had it? No. Well, how do you know you don't like it? I don't know. I don't like it. It looks gross. Okay, but have you tasted it? No. Okay, well, you can't really say you don't like it. I mean, you can say you don't like how it looks. You might be able to say, I don't like the color of it, but you can't say you don't like how it tastes because you never tasted it. So the same thing holds true for you. So one, if you hear somebody giving you advice about stuff, don't just dismiss it outright unless you're giving it an honest assessment. But two, as you're going to go through the process of doing it, if you're actually going to do it, then give it some time and actually put it into play and work it and put in the effort. And if it, like, it's exercise, right? You can't just exercise one day. Like, you got to give it 45, 60 days. You got to make some changes not only with the exercise, but also in the kitchen and how you're eating and what you're eating. If you're going to build a project, yeah, the hammer matters. But if you're going to buy crappy nails and crappy lumber, there's certain kinds of lumber that you'd want to buy that is better for bearing weight of human beings, right? But if you just bought like balsa wood, which is not very strong, and you try to build a deck out of balsa wood, people are going to fall right through that deck. So yeah, the The hammer matters, but the other ingredients, the other pieces, the other parts of the puzzle are also important. So make sure as you're going through these things, right, that you're doing your diligence in all of these categories before you declare that doesn't work, or at least put the modifier on there that doesn't work for me because I tried it, blah, 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 blah. And then if you say that out loud to yourself, you might identify, okay, wait a second, that's bogus because I didn't give it long enough, or I didn't try this, or, if you just step back and look at it, you're like, well, yeah, I'm missing a piece, or I didn't do something, right? So you might not need some outside help for that. But that's why somebody like a coach is so helpful, because if you said that to me, I'd say, okay, hold on. Let's say that again. This is what I think I heard you say, and I'll repeat it back. And they'll look at me like, yeah, that's what I said, but God, that's so ridiculous. I'm like, okay, I'm glad you said it, not me. I'm glad you came to that realization. So how can we change that? I'm like, well, I need to do this, that, whatever, right? And I don't need to tell them anything. They know. I didn't give it enough time. Oh, I didn't try this. Oh, yeah, I was exercising, or I was doing cardio and I did it for this amount of time, but I was eating a pizza and drinking a 6-pack of beer every single night. So I probably need to, if I want to lose weight, stop consuming so many calories, especially empty calories. And maybe I want to consume more protein and fewer carbs. Oh, you know what? That's a great idea. Why don't you try that? Why don't you keep doing the exercise stuff? Why don't you try that? There's a variable there. They go, oh, okay. And then they come back to me and go, Dave, you know what? It worked. Of course it worked. It wasn't my idea that I came up with. Like a lot of times when I do this with coaching clients, they come up with their own ideas. I ask them questions. They often know the answer. The reality is, for many of the problems we have, or many of the things we want to do in our life, we know the answers. We know what to do. We just don't do what we know. I'll say that one again. We often know what we need to do. We just don't do what we know. It's happened to me on my health and fitness journey. Like, I let my health really get away from me. And I knew why it was getting away from me. And then I knew what I needed to do to get it back. And for the longest time, I didn't. And then one day I was like, what are you doing? Let's get this back. And then between diet and exercise, I'm getting it back. But it's a process, and it takes time. And you got to use the right tools, right? You can't swing a hammer by holding, the head of it and using the handle. So as you're going through this process, as you're learning something new, as you're going, building a new website, building your email list, whatever it is you're trying to do, start a new charity, trying to do some philanthropy, whatever new thing you're trying to do, before you dismiss the tools outright, just give them a shot. Because if you use the right tool for the right job, for the right period of time, I know without a shadow of a doubt that will help you unleash your awesome on the world. See you.
Thanks for listening to Unleash the Awesome. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please share us on your favorite social media platforms using #UnleashAwesome.